problems with him, and I don't really. There was a substitute male figure in the house. I have older sisters and married.
At 88, Jack Nicholson is done playing nice, and what he finally admits stuns Hollywood. For decades, the smile hid grudges, the laughs buried rivalries, and the silence protected names no one dared to mention. Now, the legend pulls back the curtain on 5 actors who pushed him past tolerance into outright hatred. These aren't rumors, whispers, or studio myths. This is Jack Nicholson, unfiltered, and it's far more brutal than anyone expected. Leonardo DiCaprio. This wasn't resentment. It was discomfort. When Jack Nicholson joined The Departed, the pairing with Leonardo DiCaprio was framed as a symbolic passing of the torch, a collision between Hollywood's old guard and its modern standard-bearer. On screen, the dynamic was electric. Off-screen, it never quite settled into ease. DiCaprio arrived intensely self-aware, carefully guarded, and deeply internal. He carried his character with him between takes, stayed focused, and rarely broke the emotional pressure he'd built. Nicholson noticed immediately. Jack valued looseness. He believed great performances came from unpredictability, risk, and the willingness to let a scene surprise even the actor inside it. To him, DiCaprio's caution didn't read as discipline. It felt constricting. On set, the contrast was constant. DiCaprio avoided idle chatter, rarely joked, and remained immersed in his role. Nicholson thrived on disruption. He talked, he watched, he tested the room. At times, he deliberately pushed scenes off script, shifting rhythms or changing emphasis without warning. On more than one occasion, he reportedly startled DiCaprio on purpose. To one side, it felt like provocation. To the other, it was initiation, the way Nicholson had always measured whether a fellow actor could stay alive inside chaos. Their scenes crackled because of that tension. Nicholson expanded. DiCaprio compressed. The push and pull created an edge that translated powerfully on screen. But when the cameras stopped rolling, the distance returned. There were no shared rituals, no casual bonding, no sense of camaraderie. They occupied the same set, not the same space. Martin Scorsese often found himself in the middle. He understood both men intimately. He gave Nicholson freedom, trusting that Jack's unpredictability would add danger to the film. At the same time, he hoped DiCaprio would adapt, loosen his grip, and meet that energy without retreating. DiCaprio did adjust, professionally, skillfully. But the underlying tension never fully dissolved. After the film's release, DiCaprio praised Nicholson openly, calling the experience formative and expressing admiration for his fearlessness. Nicholson deflected. When asked about working with DiCaprio, he avoided specifics, redirected questions, or spoke in generalities about generational differences. He never returned the praise publicly, not out of spite, but out of instinct. Jack had always been wary of excessive control. There was no feud, no fallout, no bitterness, just incompatibility. Nicholson distrusted performances that felt managed rather than lived. DiCaprio embodied preparation, intention, and emotional containment. Both approaches were valid. Both produced results. But they moved in opposite directions. They never collaborated again. Shelley Duvall. The Shining looked flawless on paper. Stanley Kubrick directing at the height of his obsession with control, Jack Nicholson operating at full creative voltage, and Shelley Duvall cast in one of the most psychologically demanding roles ever written. What audiences never saw was how fragile the balance on set truly was. Nicholson respected Kubrick's vision almost instinctively. He understood the director's hunger for precision, repetition, and psychological pressure. Jack himself believed deeply in discipline, but he also believed in rhythm. He often compared acting to music. Timing, harmony, and shared tempo mattered as much as raw emotion. From early in the shoot, he sensed something was misaligned. To him, Duvall wasn't quite playing in the same key. Kubrick's relentless process pushed Duvall toward visible exhaustion. Endless takes, emotional isolation, and deliberate stress wore her down day by day. Many on set empathized with her struggle. Nicholson did not intervene. Whether by personal choice or by Kubrick's unspoken expectation, he maintained a noticeable distance. He showed up prepared, delivered precisely what was asked, and retreated. One crew member later recalled Nicholson quietly questioning whether what he was witnessing was still performance, or something collapsing in real time. Jack never erupted. He never confronted Duvall directly. That wasn't his style. But once his confidence in a scene partner faded, it revealed itself through withdrawal. The warmth disappeared. The collaboration narrowed. He stopped adjusting to meet her energy and instead locked into his own internal meter. When asked during production whether the shoot was draining, Nicholson deflected. He didn't criticize the work. He criticized the waiting, the pauses, the delays, the sense that momentum was constantly being interrupted. Ironically, the tension audiences later praised on-screen was exactly what unsettled him off-screen. Viewers saw terror, imbalance, and psychological fracture and assumed it was masterfully engineered. Nicholson wasn't so sure. In later interviews, he avoided open criticism, but he also withheld admiration. When pressed about Duvall's performance, he described her as difficult to read, sometimes a strength, sometimes a liability. It was as close as he ever came to acknowledging the fracture. They never worked together again. Nicholson had endured volatile collaborators before and could tolerate strong personalities, even chaos, when it was intentional. What unsettled him was instability he couldn't predict or control. He thrived in darkness that was shaped and purposeful, not raw and uncontained. Years later, he summed up his preference simply. He valued actors who arrived focused and left their emotional baggage outside the door. When filming ended, there was no confrontation and no reconciliation. Nicholson packed up, moved on, and never looked back. Ryan O'Neal. In the early 1970s, Hollywood embraced O'Neal as a golden boy. Love Story turned him into a global phenomenon almost overnight, the kind of star studios could build entire marketing campaigns around. To the industry, that success was proof enough. To Nicholson, it meant very little. Jack had always separated stardom from respect. In his mind, box office appeal was temporary currency, while artistic conviction was the only thing that endured. Both men moved through the same Hollywood ecosystem: red carpets, premieres, award circuits, and private industry gatherings, but they operated by entirely different philosophies. Nicholson chased discomfort. He sought out roles that made audiences uneasy, characters that exposed ugliness, risk, and contradiction. O'Neal, by contrast, gravitated toward polished leading man roles, projects designed to please rather than provoke. Those close to Nicholson say he viewed O'Neal's rise as a triumph of timing and luck rather than creative daring. Jack once remarked, more than once, that luck and talent were not the same thing, and that luck eventually runs out. The comment was never framed as an attack, but it was widely understood to be personal. Behind the scenes, Nicholson reportedly dismissed O'Neal as someone he couldn't trust creatively. It wasn't just about performance. Jack disliked O'Neal's presence, his approach to the work, and the atmosphere he believed O'Neal brought onto a set. At one point, the two were briefly considered for the same military-themed film. Insiders say Nicholson quietly stepped away from the project without explanation. Shortly afterward, the production unraveled entirely. No public drama followed, but the message within industry circles was unmistakable. Jack didn't compete loudly. He simply removed himself. When Stanley Kubrick announced Barry Lyndon, many assumed Nicholson would land the lead. Kubrick admired actors who challenged him, and Jack fit that mold perfectly. Instead, the role went to O'Neal. Nicholson never commented publicly on the decision, but insiders say it lingered. Later that year, on an unrelated production, Jack reportedly joked that Hollywood had mistaken a performer for a king. He never named names. He didn't have to. The issue wasn't the role itself. It was what it symbolized. As the years passed, O'Neal's reputation softened, then slowly faded. Personal turmoil and professional instability replaced the sheen of his early success. Nicholson, meanwhile, remained selective, guarded, and mythic. When asked about actors whose careers unraveled, Jack offered only a smile and a carefully chosen line about the difference between impact and residue. The meaning was clear to anyone listening closely. They never collaborated. No shared scenes, no surprise cameos, no late-life reconciliation. For Nicholson, exclusion was never punishment. It was instinct. Once he decided someone weakened the work, the door didn't slam. It simply stayed shut. Meryl Streep. Not all rivalries in Hollywood ignite into open conflict. Some simply cool into distance, settling quietly into professional separation. That was the case with Jack Nicholson and Meryl Streep. They worked together only once, on Heartburn, two of the most acclaimed actors of their generation. One film, no second attempt. What emerged was not hostility, but incompatibility. From the outset, their methods pointed in opposite directions. Streep approached her role with discipline, structure, and careful calibration. Every beat was mapped. Every emotional shift was supported by intention and technique. Nicholson, by contrast, thrived on unpredictability. He trusted impulse over architecture, reaction over rehearsal. For him, performance was something discovered in the moment, not assembled in advance. Neither approach was wrong, but neither bent. The set remained professional and calm. There were no raised voices, no behind-the-scenes drama, no rumors of feuds. Yet observers noticed an absence of connection. Scenes felt less like collaboration and more like two separate performances unfolding side by side. Streep refined her choices, polishing each take. Nicholson responded to what was happening around him, adjusting in real time. They respected each other's talent, but they never synchronized. At one point, Nicholson was reportedly asked to restrain his performance to better align with the scene's tone. He disagreed, not confrontationally, but firmly. He suggested that contrast, rather than uniformity, would balance the moment. To him, tension between styles could create depth. Instead, the difference remained unresolved. The scene didn't break, but it didn't fuse either. When filming wrapped, there was no fallout, no lingering bitterness, just an unspoken understanding that the experiment was complete. They finished the project politely, professionally, and without warmth. In the years that followed, Nicholson rarely mentioned Streep at all. There was no criticism, but there was no admiration offered either. Silence became the statement. Streep, equally measured, never pursued another collaboration. She continued building a career defined by transformation and precision, working with directors and actors who mirrored her structured approach. Nicholson moved in the opposite direction, becoming increasingly selective, trusting instinct over alignment, gravitating toward environments that allowed unpredictability to thrive. When Nicholson was later asked whether he would work with Streep again, his response was brief and final. Once, he said, was sufficient. There was no edge in the remark, just clarity. Tom Cruise. The collaboration between Jack Nicholson and Tom Cruise was one of those quiet divisions. A Few Good Men gave audiences one of the most electrifying confrontations in cinema history. On screen, the clash felt volcanic. Off-screen, it was controlled, measured, and final. Cruise arrived on set exactly as his reputation promised. Methodical, precise, relentlessly prepared. Every line was refined, every beat calculated. He treated performance like architecture, measured, reinforced, perfected through repetition. Nicholson arrived differently. He responded to the room. He listened more than he rehearsed. He believed acting lived in timing, instinct, and presence, rather than polish. To Jack, the work wasn't something you engineered. It was something you inhabited. Crew members noticed the contrast immediately. Between takes, Cruise paced, adjusted, recalibrated. Nicholson sat still, watching. He absorbed the temperature of the set, the silences, the tension in the air. Where Cruise sharpened, Nicholson softened, waiting for the moment to arrive naturally. At one point, Jack reportedly remarked that soul couldn't be choreographed. It wasn't an insult. It was a world view. Acting to him wasn't about control. It was about surrender. Although Nicholson was only required for a limited portion of the shoot, he stayed longer than necessary. He watched Cruise work with curiosity more than rivalry. After one take, he allegedly observed, quietly, without edge, that Cruise had everything except weight. It wasn't dismissive. It was diagnostic. Speed versus gravity. Efficiency versus depth. Cruise moved quickly through emotion. Nicholson lingered inside it. The famous courtroom scene crystallized the divide. Cruise pushed forward, sharp and urgent. Nicholson held back, letting the moment stretch until it cracked. The explosion audiences remember wasn't rehearsed aggression. It was contrast. Two philosophies colliding in real time. The scene worked because neither man adjusted to the other. They stayed exactly who they were. When awards season arrived, the difference widened. Cruise leaned into promotion, interviews, visibility. Nicholson stepped away. He had always believed the work should speak once and then be left alone. Their collaboration ended where it began, on screen. Cruise later expressed interest in working together again. Nicholson never responded. There was no feud, no bitterness, no public dismissal. The divide was never personal. It was philosophical. Nicholson trusted actors who were rather than performed. Cruise trusted preparation, repetition, and mastery of craft. Both approaches worked. Both careers soared, but they moved in opposite directions. Cruise continued rising with discipline and momentum. Nicholson remained selective, instinctive, and elusive. What do you think about the names that Jack Nicholson especially hates? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.